Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Her Take. We are together for the first time since Charlie Kirk's assassination, and we are all feeling pretty emotional right now. We have a lot to share with you today. We're going to be debunking some of the slurs against Charlie Kirk. We're going to be talking about the killer and the conspiracies around his text messages. We're talking about Jimmy Kimmel being suspended from ABC and the dangers of demonizing and othering each other and how to stop. So, first up, Lindy is going to start with some of the Charlie Kirk lies and myths about him being a racist and a bigot and an advocate for violence. So, Lindy, please take us through each and every one of these sickening claims.
Ladies, first of all, it's really, really good to be with you guys during this tumultuous and heartrending time for not only our country, but our world. And I want to encourage each of you to jump in. I know that we're all going to take one of these claims and try to debunk. So I don't want to dominate the time. I just want to make sure that we all have a chance to speak up and make sure that some of the lies are dispelled. I think one of the most visible ones, and it was all over X, is when famed author Stephen King, if we can throw that up, falsely accused Charlie Kirk of advocating the stoning of gay people, which is a bombshell of an allegation that also happens to be false. And coming from someone who has millions of followers on X, it was just extremely hurtful to see this. When Charlie is on air, Charlie's on X time and time again, combating anti-gay extremism. And initially, when Stephen King was called out, he doubled down. But what I think eventually he realized that he had no legs to stand on, and he apologized profusely again and again. But the damage is already done. And it's reminiscent of what happened with the New York Times. Actually, this is a slight sidebar, but they said that Charlie Kirk was anti-Semite. And then they issued a correction that wasn't seen by even a fraction. Like, for example, the article itself was seen by millions of people, but the correction was seen by hundreds. So the lie is already out there, and then they're worried, and the damage is already done. And when you issue a correction, it's only seen by a small portion of the people who had initially seen the lie. And so, ladies, what do you think about this? It's kind of like the horse getting let out of the barn and then him apologizing, but the apology doesn't go as far.
Let's be clear. And I want to go to Jill, because obviously as the gay person on the panel, you can provide great insight.
Give me this one. Yeah, but go, please, Amy, finish your thought, and then we'll go to you and then Anna.
Really quick, what I wanted to talk about was all of the gay content creators that I know who were on the right, people such as Jillian, people such as Amir Odon, who actually put out a whole video debunking all of these myths about Charlie being this hateful, vengeful, homophobic, transphobic person. He is a Christian, so yes, he does believe in the sanctity of a man and a woman being married under God, but he also understood that politics is about addition and not subtraction. And he said as much in his videos. And when people are able to rally behind general ideas that will move our society forward, that's who he was trying to bring into the party. People who had good ideas, despite the fact that maybe he wasn't 100% on board with what they did in the bedroom. And honestly, that is irrelevant, because it was never a part of his rhetoric to begin with. It's what everybody's trying to lump in after the fact to rewrite history. But he has platformed several content creators who are gay. And Jillian can speak to this firsthand, right, Jill?
Well, first of all, let's address the stoning gays, because here's what's going on. They're clipping a fraction of a sentence out of context, and you're going to see it in every single one of these things that we debunk, from the Civil Rights Act to criticisms of MLK to him celebrating attacks on Paul Pelosi and now to stoning gays. So I actually got a message from somebody in my life on the left who's like, really? You defend him? Do you know he advocated for stoning gays? So of course I went down, right. So I'm like, okay, show me where he advocates for stoning gays. You know how hard I had to look for this, by the way? So it turns out that what he was doing was showing the ways in which people cherry pick Bible verses. So he was saying, listen, you can quote this piece of the Bible, but in this other exact same part of the Bible, it talks about stoning gays. He's like, just saying, like, be real careful what you cherry pick with regard to excerpts and the case you're trying to make. He never advocated for stoning gays. In addition, there are numerous videos, and Connor, maybe you have one, where he goes after people.
Yes, we actually do have one.
Yes, I want to show that in 2 seconds, if that's okay with you, Lindy, where he goes after people on the alt-right who attack gays. He's like, there is no room for you in this party. What do you care what gay people do in their bedroom? There's room for, and he lists all these conservatives from Peter Thiel to Dave Rubin. He invited me, a married gay woman, to come on his podcast, to talk at Turning Point. He's reposted things that I've posted about unity and health, by the way. So this is not a man who is a bigot or thinks gays should be stoned and don't deserve to exist. That's a lie. And I'll say the final thing. He is religious. He doesn't believe in gay marriage. It is against his religion. I respect his views. I don't agree with him. It's okay to disagree with people. He also doesn't believe that children, and he has pointed out this distinction, that children should be transitioned with regard to their gender. And he has made it very clear that as an adult, he doesn't agree with it, but it's your life, do what you want. And he thinks it's unfair for biological males to compete in biological female sports, which, by the way, is now pretty much the consensus for over 80% of the population in our country. So can we take a look at the clip where he rips someone a new one for being anti-gay?
Yes, Connor. Also, he didn't just retweet you, Jillian. I want to make clear, he retweeted you 3 to 4 hours before he passed away. You were one of the last people Charlie Kirk retweeted on this earth. I just want people to know that. So for people to make this allegation, it's just so damn wrong.
Let's play the video.
Hey, Mr. Kirk, thanks for coming out tonight. I got a question for you real quick. Up until about 5 years ago, when gay marriage was legalized nationwide, the conservative movement has been explicitly pro-traditional family. Now, both you and your organization advocate for the acceptance of anti-Christian, immoral lifestyles like homosexuality and transsexuality, going as far to invite drag queens like Lady MAGA to your events. It seems to me and anyone who's paying attention that conservatives just believe whatever liberals believed 5 years ago. Right now, there's a push by the left to normalize pedophilia by way of child drag queen shows and, excuse me, don't show off.
Go back to your notes. That's probably where you saved it. You got to push double tap and then go over.
Right now, there is a push by the left to normalize pedophilia by way of child drag queen shows and rebranding pedophiles as minor attracted persons. 5 years from now, will you be promoting child drag queen shows? Will child abuse become part of the conservative platform?
Boy, that's a slippery slope fallacy if I've ever seen one. First of all, I've never invited a drag queen to come to any Turning Point USA event. I was at Politicon, and an individual by the name of Lady MAGA came up, and I took a picture, and she walked away. Secondly, let me ask you a question. Are you a Trump supporter?
Yes, sir.
So are you a proud Trump supporter?
Of course.
So are you sickened that he had a gay man speak at his convention?
Yes.
Then you're not a Trump supporter, my friend. Thank you very much. Let me ask you another question. Should he return the money of Peter Thiel, an openly gay man who supports his campaign?
No.
Yes, but
okay. Should he stop talking to Tammy Bruce, who's an open lesbian that's a Fox News contributor?
If it's affecting his ideas, then probably, yeah.
Okay, so you say you're a Trump supporter, yet you have all these issues and these disagreements with him. Let me be very clear about my position. My personal position. I'm a Christian first and foremost, then an American, then a constitutionalist, then a conservative, in that order. I believe marriage, biblically, if we want to have a biblical and theological discussion as articulated in the greatest book ever to exist in the history of the world, the Holy Bible. Marriage and the Holy Bible is one man, one woman. I also do not believe in the sort of rhetoric that some people engage in, that all of a sudden that they say there's no place for gay people in the conservative movement. I do not believe that. And let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question then?
Sure, go for it.
So, the American family, liberty, freedom, the Constitution, our history, veterans, that's what we're conserving. I'll get to you later, though. Don't worry. So let me ask you a question. What if you had your way? What would you do with gay people in America?
What would I do with them?
Because they're not allowed in the conservative movement. So would you just kick them out anytime they show up at a Republican Party? If you were in charge, like what would you say? You can't be part of the Republican Party.
If somebody is advocating for being openly homosexual, yeah, they should not be part of the conservative movement.
So I just want to go through the list. Guy Benson, no place in the conservative movement. Dave Rubin, no place in the conservative movement. Peter Thiel, no place in the conservative movement. So that just to go down the list.
If they're supporting open homosexuality.
So I'm going to ask a very respectful question, as respectfully as I can. What does what they do in their private life concern you so much that you have to go up in front of a crowd? And
it is against God. That is.
So let me ask you a question.
Are you a Christian or not?
Do we live in a theocracy? Yes or no? No. Do we live in a theocracy?
You said you're a Christian.
I am a Christian. And do you know what? And guess what? I will say this. Part of being a Christian is appropriately interpreting what the theological says for the individual, but also means to be long-suffering and patient and loving and kind.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ talked to all people. Jesus Christ went and did his ministry through Judea and Samaria, and he had dinner with tax collectors, and he had dinner with prostitutes, and he did his ministry in every part of the Mediterranean. What it means to be a Christian, my friend, is to be open-minded but firm in your beliefs, so you can have that belief. But if you say there's something inherently wrong with communicating or associating just because they make different personal decisions than you, then you, sir, are not a conservative. Thanks for being here tonight.
Wow. Anna, you want to jump in?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing this video, Lindy, because I had never seen it. I knew that his stoning gays comment was totally taken out of context. In fact, there was a correction after the fact, after the double down, then there was a correction, but I hadn't seen that exchange. And I think this kind of touches on a deeper problem that we're seeing with all sorts of political figures, political pundits, journalists. There's such an obsession with this like partisan identity or partisan brain rot that people are taken out of context all the time. And I had realized that I had like made my character judgments of people based on quick little snippets, quick little clips. And then I realized, wait a minute, people are taking me out of context, which obviously means the people that I'm so critical of are being taken out of context. So whenever we covered stories about some big controversy on the right or a right winger saying something, I basically told my production team, listen, you can't go based off of the Twitter clip. I need more context. I need to know what they actually said. And then we can have the accurate analysis of who this person is, what their character is, what they actually stand for. And I would just caution everyone, regardless of your political identity, to really go out of your way and try to find that person's comments in full context. And you'll learn a lot. And more importantly, you'll become a happier person because it kind of lifts this veil of like, oh my God, we're living in a country of so many evil, dangerous people. Well, are they really evil and dangerous, or were they clipped out in a way to make them look as such?
Who wants the next one? Should we tackle him being a giant racist or him saying the Civil Rights Act was the worst thing that ever passed in the country? Like, who's next? Who wants that one?
I mean, one thing that I think is really, really important to cover is what all the liberals are posting right now, that Charlie Kirk said that, unfortunately, a couple of gun deaths per year are worth it for us to have our Second Amendment. And the way that this is being portrayed, it is as if they're saying that he is giving some type of an endorsement on political violence and assassinations, when that is very much so not the case. And anyone who has two brain cells to rub together can tell you the difference, the stark difference between those two things. And an observation that I have made since coming into politics and seeing all of this heavy rhetoric about gun restrictions and all of these things, the way it all comes from the left, it's really interesting to see that conservatives want to maintain the Second Amendment, and they talk about guns being used for hunting and for sport and for, guess what, self-defense, because on the balance of probabilities, most of the time, that is what conservatives use them for. And likewise, it is also very interesting to see the way that liberals want to control guns and limit the Second Amendment because it causes murder, because guns are murdering people, because from what I've seen, when I'm analyzing these statistics about political violence, it seems like it's mostly at the hands of liberals when there is a gun. And I saw the YouGov report that came out and some of the way that the statistics have been misrepresented, okay? The way that they list down far-right extremists and conservatives for gun violence in places where it didn't belong, the same way that they jotted down COVID deaths for people who died of a motorcycle accident, okay? These people are the arbiters of history. They get to determine the way that it is displayed to the public, but that should not detract from the fact that Charlie Kirk was not and never was in support of political violence. In fact, that is why, as a moderate on the conservative side, he made sure he had these conversations with people because he believed that when conversation stopped, violence began.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He says it over and over again. That's his signature line, Amy. You're absolutely spot on. Somebody asked him, like, why are you on this campus today? And he explicitly said, because when we stop talking, violence begins. Mm-hmm. And I do want to say that I find it extremely disturbing that after every mass shooting, liberals always like, oh, we need more gun control and we should ban assault weapons. But after Charlie was murdered, they haven't said a single thing about that. I haven't heard a peep from anybody on the left saying that we should have more gun control or gun policy.
Yeah, I feel like the gun control argument has kind of worn off, specifically because of the fact that you've got to realize we're living in a country where we have more guns per capita than literally any other country. I think the country that comes in second is like Somalia. We have more guns per capita than Somalia. So like, I get what Charlie was saying in that we have certain rights or certain privileges, right? Being able to drive a car is a privilege. Would we be willing to give up that privilege simply because there are a ton of car accidents every year where people die? Right. No, we're not willing to give up cars. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I get what he was arguing.
Seatbelts instead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so exactly. So like when it comes to gun control, right, I do think, there are certain very narrow issues where I think we can maybe tackle it through policy, maybe make it a little more difficult for people to buy as many guns as they want from the back of a truck at a gun show without any background check, right? That's a very narrow area where maybe we can have a conversation and find a good policy that doesn't infringe on Second Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. But one other thing that I will say, and this is like a broader conversation about this assassination. Immediately, the first thing that happened in the media, the first thing that the elite did was start like pitting Americans against each other, right? Like we need to fight each other. Oh, the left is more violent. The right is more violent. The fact of the matter is there's been political violence on both sides of the political aisle. I think the left has been in denial about political violence on their side. And we need to come to grips with that. Recognize that and not constantly engage in like this knee-jerk reaction of immediately blaming the other side. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah. That's going to come up on that topic. But, we need to be really careful to not fall for certain narratives that I believe at this point are meant to pit Americans, normal, everyday Americans against each other. Candace Owens, of all people, said that on her show yesterday. Mm-hmm. And I was really, really happy to hear it because it is true. There are good people on the right, good people on the left. They love the country. They want what's best for the country. And what I appreciate about Charlie Kirk, even though we had disagreements, was that despite those disagreements, we were able to sit together, right? Exchange what our views were, debate our views. And you're so right, Amy. That is like a celebration of liberal democracy. Yeah. If you actually believe in liberal democracy, you need to foster the type of environment that celebrates that puts that type of conversation or dialogue on a pedestal. But what that disgusting assassin did was essentially show a level of cowardice in that you're not able to fight back through dialogue, through debate. You can't articulate what your position is and win over hearts and minds through persuasion. So you pick up a gun and you literally rob someone of their life. That's like the definition of cowardice to me.
Anna, you're absolutely right. He was murdered for doing the most American thing, which is to debate. And Voltaire, the French philosopher, said, "I may not agree with you, but I will fight to the death for your right to say that." And I truly believe that Charlie Kirk embodied that. And I just want to point out another lie that they've been spreading. And it hits home because, first of all, Anna, it involves somebody you know very well. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
People have been saying that Charlie Kirk
you haven't seen this, Anna? Do it, Lindy.
An anti-Asian bigot.
Yes, right.
And Jillian, you know what I'm talking about. They've
show
been
her
saying
the video.
that Charlie used chink against people of Asian descent. But what was really happening was he was saying, "Jenk, your co-host."
I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
So somebody misheard, or they
intentionally
distorted what he was saying to make it seem like he was using a racial slur, but he was really saying the name.
He was saying the word "jenk," and they thought he said "chink."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We don't even need to pull it up. He's screaming, "Of course I'm the capitalist, jank."
Yeah. I remember that moment.
People turned around and said that
but it became a viral clip, and people were like, "Oh, Charlie's using chink."
Yep.
That's amazing.
I want to get to, I think this is the MLK and the civil rights stuff is very important. Who wants to tackle this one? We need to really be clear about what was said, and it's absolutely fine if you disagree with him, but we need to disagree about what's true, not what's manipulated, mischaracterized, and lied about. Lindy, you want to do this one?
This one is this might not be the answer that you suspect, because I did read a lot of the same materials that Charlie did. And in fact, I have one right here. I hadn't planned on doing this, but this book also covers a lot of the files at the FBI. The FBI had actually been wiretapping Martin Luther King Jr. and realized that he was engaging in a lot of activities that the public didn't know about previously. And I know that's what Charlie was referring to. It doesn't have anything to do with his legacy on civil rights, though. Charlie was addressing his personal conduct.
Two things, actually. I listened to the entire hour and 22-minute podcast about his position on the Civil Rights Act and MLK. So the first thing is there is a guest on who is, I believe, a Black preacher, and he's talking about the fact that MLK was a womanizer. And you know what? Let's table that. That wasn't something actually Charlie said. It was something one of his guests said. His actual two top criticisms of MLK, and you can be mad about it, but let's talk about what's real, was the fact that he was the first recipient of the Sanger Award. So Sanger is the woman who started Planned Parenthood, and there's some discussion, some belief that MLK helped facilitate putting Planned Parenthood in Black neighborhoods. Now, I'm under the impression that MLK did this for economic freedom, freedom of choice, all reproductive rights, and all those things that are well-intentioned. Charlie is anti-abortion. So Charlie, his top criticism is that you lost more Black babies because of this. If you're a racist, you're not going to want more Black babies in the world. Just saying. So if you want to be pissed about his position on Planned Parenthood, be my friggin' guest. But he wanted more Black children in the world. That was his top criticism of MLK. Then the second one, with regard to the Civil Rights Act, there are several criticisms here. He first says that on its face, its intentions are noble and ideal and awesome. And we have a great clip of Jeff Mead actually talking about this and showing Charlie saying this. So in fact, let's run that clip if we can of Jeff Mead showing Charlie Kirk praising the intentions of the Civil Rights Act. Can you play that for me, Connor?
Okay, so I've had a whole lot of white folks commenting on my last video asking for proof that Charlie Kirk was an outspoken racist. And there are many horrible quotes to choose from, but there's one that I haven't seen get quite as much attention that I believe is head and shoulders worse than all the rest. In December of 2023, Kirk said, quote, we made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s, end quote.
See how he said end quote? Charlie Kirk has explained his reasoning behind this multiple times. And these people have to leave out the context in order to paint the picture they want to paint. Listen to Charlie Kirk talking about this.
You said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the parts of the Civil Rights Act were great, but the way it's now being implemented to force men in female bathrooms to push forward of the trans agenda, the intent of the Civil Rights Act is way beyond what it was originally authored for.
But the intent specifically originally was to...
Well, that's interesting. So the intent and the law are two different things. So the intent was noble, which was to say that no American can be not allowed into a place of business based on the color of their skin or their ethnic heritage. Totally agreement with that.
Did we see what he just said?
Okay, stop it. So
was
very clearly he says, I am totally in agreement with that. He goes on in the hour and 22-minute long podcast to talk about the fact that because it's broad and because it's vague, it has allowed room to get rid of voter ID or to put men in women's sports or to put men in women's safe spaces. So it has nothing to do with equal rights and equal opportunity for people of color. Absolutely nothing. And he has debunked it numerous times. His other criticism of MLK has to do with the fact that MLK leaned more towards, quite literally, democratic socialism. And he thinks that this has crippled Black families because of the no men in the house clause that incentivizes people to remove fathers or even strong male figures from the home in order to get government assistance. And he talks about how government came in and took the role of fathers. And he goes on to say how this is awful in every single household, but people of color, in particular Black Americans, were disproportionately affected. And it's a crime because it's hurt Black families. If this man is a racist, don't you think he would want to see the destruction of Black families? These are lies. These are manipulations. These are mischaracterizations, and they are done on purpose because they need you to believe this narrative that Charlie Kirk, who is converting millions of young people to the right, is a hate speech, racist, bigot monster. Who wants to go? Anna, I hear you go.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just think I think that there is a problem in, I don't know, our current culture doesn't really seem to value nuance. And I don't agree with even what Charlie Kirk said in that context. My values are a little different, right? But at least understand what he's saying. And the way that it's kind of been, sold to everyone is that he was a racist who didn't believe in equal rights and equal protection for people of color, which obviously wasn't true. He just felt that the laws were written way too broadly and now applied to certain groups that he doesn't agree should be applied to. Okay, at least in this case, understanding the nuance of his argument, you are better able to, if you're on the left and you disagree, you are better able to dismantle the argument. But what I've noticed is, since we live in these media bubbles and since the left listens to left-wing hosts and the right listens to right-wing hosts, what ends up happening is you don't understand your political opponent's argument. And then when these debates happen, you kind of fall flat on your face. Now, I've noticed that the right has actually been a lot more willing to foster an environment where opposing views are represented, debates are happening. And because of that, because they never bought into that culture of like, oh, don't platform someone on the other side, which the left for a long time has fully bought into. But I think we're moving away from that. Whenever these debates between the left and the right would happen, the right winger would understand the left wing's argument and they were ready and prepared to dismantle it. And then the left person would kind of fall flat on their face. I've seen that happen multiple times. And guys, if you're on the left, please do not buy into this like ridiculous culture of like not wanting to platform someone you disagree with, because you need to understand your political opponent's arguments rather than allowing other left wingers who might be misleading to like paint a picture for you and tell you what the right wing's argument is, which oftentimes can be misleading or inaccurate.
That's right. And I want to make sure that people understand why they are lying about Charlie, why they are defaming his legacy and desecrating everything he's been fighting for. And that's because we are right now in the midst of a propaganda war. They realize that Charlie Kirk is incredibly effective. They also realize his murder has been galvanizing millions of people around the country and across the globe. And that is why they are tarnishing his legacy and distorting everything that he says, because they also understand that a lot of the times people don't bother, like Anna said, looking into nuance. They only read the headlines and then they move on. They don't bother to do any due diligence on what exactly he said. And another thing that I want to draw your attention to is that in recent years, in the era of Trump, young men have been shifting dramatically to the right. In fact, they've become more conservative than young women. And I think that has a lot to do with figures like Charlie Kirk, making it cool again to be a conservative family guy. You know, he has said time and time again that if the one thing that he wants to be remembered for, the one thing, his greatest priority if he ever ran for office, it would be the sanctification of the family, of the American family, of prioritizing that. As Jillian, you just said, he really cares about the family unit. You know, having a father, having a mother who can nurture the children. And they see Charlie Kirk as a threat, and that is why they are working overtime. It's overdrive right now. They're doing everything to dismantle his legacy.
Can we do one more?
And really quick.
You're right. Go ahead.
Really quick. You know, it's when you see the way that his positions have been mischaracterized, you can understand that we are in a propaganda war right now, because Charlie Kirk was the more moderate one of the people who are representing the Conservative Party. In fact, he is now publicly, he said publicly in an interview with his wife that she was the far more conservative one between the two of them, that he was a moderate by comparison. And guess what? Now she is the one who is leading TPUSA. When there is a vacuum, something is going to come in and fill it. And what I can assure all of you guys is that he was the very friendly one. He was the very moderate one and nice one that was willing to engage in various different dialogues. But, you know, while there are more extreme figures out there, one positive just white pill that I want to leave about all of this, because it's been so incredibly disheartening, obviously, is that, you know, whereas before this big tent party, the GOP, right, we are taking in people from multiple different demographics. And that was evidenced by the 2024 election. We saw people from different demographics move right that had never really moved right before, okay? We're seeing people who are coming over to this side and have been coming over to this side. We are this big tent party, and naturally, as a result of that, there's going to be infighting. And so, you know, the last 6-9 months or so, I've seen Catholics fight with Christians. I've seen moderates fight with people on the far right, and people pointing fingers at each other. But one positive thing that's really come for this is the rallying together. The line in the sand was a little bit blurry before. Catholics were wanting to fight with Christians and this and that. No, now the line in the sand is Charlie Kirk's assassination. The people who are on the side of celebrating that are the ones in the wrong. And everyone who is willing to condemn not only the assassination, but that behavior, and people who know that the people exhibiting that are not conducive, we cannot coexist with these people in our everyday life. We don't want to be around them in our workplace. We don't want our children to be around them, right? And so I think it has established a new line, and this is a positive that's come from it, is there's going to be less infighting now, because we've seen the face of the true enemy, and it isn't amongst each other. It's this demonic, evil energy that's coming from these people that have been less than human in their response. Like, it's honestly been dumbfounding to see the way people have responded. But just like people have felt so pained and grieved from his death because they're a part of the body of Christ, these people who are celebrating his death are a part of a body of evil. And that's why they're celebrating.
I want to get to that. Go ahead, Anna. I can see. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's the difference for me, since, I mean, for me, the difference is whether or not you believe in liberal democracy, whether or not you believe in using violence as a, you know, means of getting what you want, which, by the way, never works, obviously. And so I don't care if you're on the left or the right. What I care about is, what are your values? And if you are illiberal, meaning you don't believe in our Constitution, our system of government, duking things out through dialogue, well, then you're right, Amy. Like, you can't really work with these people. You can't have a conversation with them. But I also would caution, because I think people can change, people can grow. And for all the people out there who, look back at some of the things that Charlie Kirk said that you vehemently disagree with, and you're convinced that he was hateful, whatever, you also have to keep in mind he was super young. And I look back at some of the things I said when I was super young, because I've been on air since I was 20. Who I was at 20 is very different from who I am today. So you have to give people an opportunity to grow, to mature, to learn. And when that growth does happen, I think we need to be less cynical about that growth and just assume that it's done for political reasons. Because if someone is growing up in front of a camera, they are going to change. They are going to mature. And I think we saw a little bit of that even with Charlie Kirk. Who he was in 2015, 2016 wasn't exactly the same as who he was, the day that he was assassinated. He grew and he matured, and there was still so much potential for him, and that was robbed from him. So that's my take on it.
I just you and I have also grown in recent years. I think, we are allowed to shift. Frankly, I think it would be a shame if you stayed glued to your original set of beliefs and didn't change any of your views based on new information. I do want to point out, though, there's a distinct difference between the way that conservatives have responded to this tragedy and the way that the left responded to the George Floyd killing. It's just night and day. For example, in 2020, streets were burned down, cars were overturned, police were attacked, stores were vandalized. Nationwide, there was $2 billion in damage. What happened this time? Candlelight vigils, prayers, people coming together in peace, unity around the world, in love for each other, in appreciation of Charlie. So I think that says everything about the beating heart of the conservative movement. And it completely validates Charlie's life. I'm incredibly touched. And they think that they murdered the figurehead, but they have unleashed a tidal wave around the world. This is boomeranged in Titanic proportions. Like Charlie Kirk's widow said, Erica Kirk said, they don't know the fire and power that they unleashed by this heinous act. Yeah.
So we've got limited time, and I wanted to ask Jillian if we should move on maybe to some of the other topics.
You're absolutely right. There's one more that I want to dispel very quickly. I will take no more than 2 minutes because I owe it to Charlie. And here's why. Connor, can you put up that clip of me on Piers the other day? So on Piers, this guy accuses Charlie of celebrating the violent political attack on Paul Pelosi. Let's play it.
Jillian, hi, Jillian. I agree with you. I think respectful conversation and political discourse is good. It's one thing I have in common with Charlie Kirk. Here's what I would say, ask you about. The day Paul Pelosi was bludgeoned with a hammer, the day after that, Charlie Kirk went on his podcast. He made jokes about it. And on his show, he asked his listeners to donate to the person who tried to kill Paul Pelosi. Are you willing to admit that that's also wrong? Because Charlie Kirk did that on his show.
Charlie didn't do that. So, of course, I went and I looked into it, and here's what happened. It's on factcheck.org. There's a link to the entire episode if you don't want to listen to it. So, October 31st, 2022, on his show, timestamp 53 minutes in, Kirk said, the attack on Paul Pelosi was, quote, awful and, quote, not right. Now, does that sound like he's making jokes? I don't think so. He said that someone should bail out the assailer, David DePape, or Pape, whatever his name is, because cashless bail policies in certain cities allow other people to commit crimes and be released from custody pending trial. So why is he still in jail? So what Charlie was doing was pointing out the hypocrisy. And he goes, why hasn't he been bailed out? And he goes, by the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to be a midterm hero, someone should bail this guy out and go ask him some questions. He goes, I am not qualifying this. I think it's awful. It's not right. He goes on to talk about cashless bail and San Francisco and how awful it is and why is it that suddenly the guy who attacks Nancy Pelosi's husband doesn't have cashless bail. So he was pointing out the hypocrisy. Anyway, my point again for the last time is, do you think this guy told anything true about that? No, he didn't say any. He said he made jokes. He didn't. He said that he celebrated it and all that. He obviously didn't. He called it out as awful and wrong, and then he mischaracterized the point that Charlie was trying to make. So we can absolutely move on, but because I was unfamiliar with this, I was incapable of giving the actualities of what occurred, and I wanted to set the record straight right now. And we are, in fact, ready to move on to Jimmy Kimmel. Anna, take it away.
All right. Well, we've seen lots of people have all sorts of pretty terrible reactions, celebratory reactions to Charlie Kirk getting assassinated. And usually it comes from like random left-wing people on social media, on TikTok. But Jimmy Kimmel also stepped in it. And as a result, the FCC chair threatened to pull licenses. And now Kimmel has been indefinitely suspended, which means, honestly, he's probably just fired. Okay, that's the way that I'm reading it at this point. Now, keep in mind that the element to focus on in this story is the involvement of Brendan Carr, who is the FCC commissioner, because I did not agree with what Jimmy Kimmel said at all. And in fact, if ABC took a look at his show and what he said in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination, and they decided, you know what, this is just, it goes too far. We're uncomfortable with this. It alienates half the country. It's not good. And they decided on their own, we don't want to deal with this. Your show is suspended. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. But literally hours after Brendan Carr appeared on Benny Johnson's show, that's when the decision to pull the plug on Jimmy Kimmel happened. Now, as CNN reported, the sudden decision made by ABC to pull the show from air came hours after Federal Communications Commission Chair Brendan Carr said on a podcast that the FCC could move to revoke ABC affiliate licenses as a way to force Disney, ABC's parent company, to punish Kimmel for recent comments he made about the reaction to Charlie Kirk's shooting. So what did Kimmel say exactly? This is all according to The Hollywood Reporter. Kimmel's original comments were as follows, quote, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it." And then he showed a video of Donald Trump essentially not really torn up about Charlie Kirk. You know, a reporter asked Trump about Charlie Kirk, and he immediately pivoted to the White House ballroom, which I will admit, not a good look, but it is what it is. Now, obviously, the shooter, the assassin, is not a MAGA conservative. So what Jimmy Kimmel said was incorrect. And I think it feeds into growing division and political hatred in this country. So I that's why I don't really have a problem with him getting fired. Again, if ABC had made that decision on their own, but I don't think they did. So Brendan Carr did mention Kimmel by name on Benny Johnson's show. Take a look at what he had to say.
I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Okay. And then that was followed up by, some very specific threats. And it wasn't just toward Kimmel and ABC. It was honestly towards some of the folks that Trump has been complaining about. So let's take a look at that.
Look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at. And again, we may ultimately be called to be a judge on that.
So literally hours after that appearance, that's when, both ABC and Nexstar, which is basically like the parent company, decided to pull the plug. Sources told The Hollywood Reporter that he planned to defend. Kimmel actually planned to defend rather than kowtowing to the outrage. And at that point, Disney thought, look, we're getting a lot of heat right now, and this is going to fan the flames. So advertisers started calling in. They were upset about it. Once advertisers start calling in, that's when networks start freaking out. Nexstar and Sinclair threatened to preempt the show, which means that Kimmel's show would have been dark in large parts of the country. And then this had even become a safety issue, according to the Hollywood Reporter, for other employees. The situation became a safety issue as Disney employees saw their emails doxxed, per the first source that they talked to. Some even received death threats. Disney wanted Kimmel to address the situation in a way that would take down the temperature, but what he had planned was going to fan the flames with the MAGA fan base, the source says. And then all of a sudden, again, this is the Hollywood Reporter, talks between Kimmel, Disney/ABC hit enough of a stalemate that executives there decided Wednesday's episode of Kimmel Live had run out of time to be salvaged. The show's live to tape time was not far off. The studio audience was lined up outside, but had not yet been brought in. By this point, 66 of the roughly 200 affiliate stations had said they would not carry the episode. That's when ABC announced it was suspending the program, a Bob Iger and Dana Walden joint decision that was a last resort, the first person says. And Walden delivered the news to Kimmel, but did not ask him to apologize, says the source, who described Wednesday as a very heavy, very hard day inside the walls of Disney and ABC. I should also note, when it comes to Nexstar, they have a $6 billion merger that they're trying to get approved by the FCC. So the FCC getting involved is what I'm not happy about. The government getting involved is what I'm not happy about. It appears that if Brendan Carr didn't get involved at all, it's very likely that ABC was going to pull the plug anyway. Mm-hmm. But when you have the government get involved and essentially bully, that's when our First Amendment rights, I think, are in jeopardy, right? Like, we shouldn't be celebrating that.
Yes.
But I am curious what you ladies think.
Completely agree. My biggest gripe with all of this is the way that it has tried to be weaponized to enforce these hate speech laws. Now, I believe that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, is already walking back some of these comments, but I'm not mad about Jimmy Kimmel being suspended indefinitely on the basis of what he said, or likewise anyone else facing repercussions for these disgusting comments that were made, which, by the way, are not just limited to America. This goes international. My mom is currently getting a teacher from my little brother's school fired because come Monday, she showed the video in the classroom and said this person deserved to die to a ninth grade classroom. Okay. And this is happening everywhere, all around the world. And there needs to be societal and moral repercussions for this, which will happen naturally when you have a society that is in alignment with the proper moral values. You don't need to add the addition of all of these legalistic things. So when Pam Bondi comes out and says we need to implement hate speech laws, let me just say, I have been so proud of not just the left and the right, the center, everyone, people who aren't even politically aligned, who are coming out and they are disavowing this. They realize the importance of the First Amendment. And in fact, what's so sick about this is she's bringing up the things that are said about Charlie Kirk to justify it. Charlie literally made a post that said there is ugly speech, there is gross speech, there is evil speech, and all of it needs to be protected by the First Amendment. That's what makes us the best country in the world. That, our Second Amendment, and the other amendments that we have afforded to us. So, Anna, I completely agree. I hate this legalistic aspect because the consequences would have happened naturally anyway because of the marketplace of ideas. And on the balance of probability, over 50% of this country is disgusted by the way the left is reacting to this. So there would have been consequences anyway. We don't need to bring in this legal stuff.
I totally agree.
I absolutely agree with you. And by the way, Anna, I love that you mentioned that there's a distinction between the ABC decision and the Brendan Carr decision, because had he not involved himself, I think the decision could actually stand on its two legs. But we saw what happened with CBS Paramount and the merger and how they struck a deal with Trump. We saw what happened with CBS 60 Minutes. And so there seems to be a pattern going on right now, but I do want to point out, none other than Charlie Kirk said, my position is even hate speech should be completely and totally allowed in our country. The most disgusting speech should absolutely be protected. And you should be allowed to say outrageous things. You should be allowed to say contrarian things. Free speech is a birthright you gave us. In much of the world, we are not allowed to have these discussions. We had a previous guest who actually tried to, move along the discussion and say things didn't matter. And the reason why that really struck a chord with us is that being able to debate these things is the sanctity of the American experience. It's so incredibly precious. And I think a lot of Americans, they don't understand how deeply special this is. Across the world, in China, in Russia, in North Korea, you would get disappeared, arrested, or even murdered for airing your view. And so this is such an amazing privilege we have here today to discuss these things. And this is something that Charlie Kirk himself would celebrate.
Just quickly, because I know we're short on time. I am not for cancel culture because power changes hands. I don't believe in it. I think people vote with the way they consume, and that's enough. I don't think that there is a moral equivalence, though, to canceling somebody because maybe they believe there are only two genders and lying or inciting violence or calling people Nazi and fascist and so on and so forth. And I want to be very clear about that. I do think, and I would actually love, Anna, in particular, your opinion, because I know you went to school for this, so I'm hoping you know more. The media has to stop lying. It is insane. They do it on purpose. And I'll give you another example. When I was on Abby Phillips' show, she flat out lied and said that it was legal for children to work at a marijuana farm because ICE had just raided a marijuana farm with undocumented and unaccompanied, meaning trafficked, minors. And that was her justification for it. It was a flat out lie. No correction, nothing. So what do we do, though, with Jimmy Kimmel? That was a lie. So he's no martyr of free speech, in my opinion. He's a liar. He was lying. And it was disgusting. And I want to be clear that I don't think he should lose his job over that. I don't actually think that's why he was going to lose his job. But nevertheless, it is what it is. And I want to call it what it is. What do we do about the bold-faced lying? Why are there no consequences for that in the media?
Well, there are actually. We've stopped watching. And that's why their businesses are tanking. And I do want to throw it to you. But apparently every night he was getting 135,000 viewers. That's nothing.
But the lying. What are we doing about the lying?
So Jillian, by turning it off and making them go out of business.
No, that's not an answer. Somebody
but Jillian, it is happening. Let me just say there is a trend right now, but there is a trend right now where people are not watching cable news or just like the legacy media that you and I grew up on. People have totally increasingly abandoned them because more and more people are realizing we're not getting the accurate story. We're not getting the full story. This is why in the 2024 election cycle, the so-called podcast bros were huge and they had way more weight in swaying the election as opposed to the cable news channels. So I kind of go back to what Amy said, because I think this is evidence of the marketplace doing what it's supposed to do. I think I have a lot more faith in Americans, right? Yes, we get misled all the time, but I think most Americans come to the fruition that, they've been consuming inaccurate information and they will change their minds. I think what's more insidious right now, though, is the algorithms that keep people in partisan bubbles, right?
Yep.
We need to do something about that. I think that's far more insidious than what some dinosaur in legacy media has to say.
I don't know, Mama. They believe it.
With you more. And Jillian, you yourself said people vote by their
wallets,
believe it,
right? Lindy.
They turn off the TV, they cut the cord, and they realize that a lot of the talking heads on cable TV, they are literally just reading. None of us here, by the way, the four of us here today, we are expressing our organic thoughts. No one handed us a script. No one gave us a set of talking points. But the people on TV right now, they are reading off the teleprompter. That's what they're doing. You can even see their eyeballs moving back and forth.
Sure.
And I think Americans increasingly realize that. And it's not just cable TV, also print media. How many times did the New York Times lie about the Russia hoax?
There should be consequences.
How many times have they issued a correction at the very bottom of the article that nobody reads?
People still believe that shit, though. This should not be allowed. If you are in a position to report the news and you give facts that are incorrect, you should be required to correct those facts. There should be some form of regulation.
The problem is that nobody reads a correction. I do appreciate. I do want to point out
you're right.
one thing, though. Guess who's suing the New York Times for a multi-billion-dollar case? Trump is suing. Because he says that they have defamed his character so egregiously. I actually think he has a case for it, because I certainly bought into the Russia hoax. I believed that for years when people like Adam Schiff was out there saying it over and over again. So there are consequences to this. And they're going to be tied up in this lawsuit for years. And it's going to cost them millions of dollars just to deal with that. So yes, Jillian, it is happening. They are facing the consequences. They cannot lie about this.
One thing I want to bring up that I believe is so important. In response to all of this, we actually saw a video from a young lady, a content creator, Connor. I don't know if you have it on standby. It's okay if you don't. But she basically put forth a case saying that in light of the Charlie Kirk assassination, we need to bring back the Smith-Mundt Act. For anyone who is unaware of what this is, it is a law that basically made it illegal to enact political propaganda on the American people. And during the Obama administration, this was repealed, okay? And so right now, there are people, Smith-Mundt Act is trending heavily. It was like a top 6 search item on X. This is like some law that people have forgotten about, literally for nearly the last decade. And now so many people are rallying saying, bring this back. These hate speech laws that Pam Bondi is floating, okay? These are things that address the effect, not the root, okay? The root of a lot of this is the way the media is doing this othering. They're weaponizing us against each other. Had something like the Smith-Mundt Act still been in place, it's very possible that Charlie Kirk would still be alive today. And so I implore everybody, call your local congressperson. They don't get that many calls. Get proactive. Let them know that this is on your radar, that you want to see this act be fought for. And if we can bring this back and rename it the Charlie Kirk Act in honor of Charlie, I think that's something that can actually make a real difference moving forward.
I love that
idea. And I also want to point out the fact that our politicians have been using language like, oh, Republicans are Nazis, they're Hitlers, they're fascists. This language, it's not casual, leads to dire consequences. It literally led to somebody being shot in the neck. And I love that my senator, John Fetterman, and also David McCormick, the other senator of Pennsylvania, came together. This is a Republican and a Democrat, yet they shared a stage. And they said, we need to stop with that. Calling everyone Hitler, first of all, it loses its meaning, because if everyone is Hitler, then nobody is Hitler. But also it's incredibly dangerous, because when you call someone Hitler, you essentially, some crazy man is going to believe that they have no choice, that they will be heralded as a hero, that they will be significant if they take out this guy. So everyone needs to tone down the rhetoric and not label people scum of the earth, because it will lead to murder.
All right, I want to move on to the next one.
Actually, I think we're saving it for Monday.
Yeah, let's do it
Monday. Saving it for Monday?
Yeah, let's do it in studio. We're all going to be together again for the first time in a while. Very excited about it. So let's save it for that.
All right. Sounds good. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. Please comment, like, share, subscribe. It helps us a ton with the algorithm. Lindy, where do we get more?
Lindy Lee on X and elsewhere. Thanks, guys.
Ames?
You guys can check out my show, Dangerous Conversations, on YouTube, and I'm Amy Dangerfield on every platform, and you can FaceTime or text me on Minect as well.
Anna?
All right. I'm Anna Kasparian Official on Instagram, but Anna Kasparian everywhere else. You can also ask me a question or ask for a conversation on Minect, and follow my daily show at youtube.com/The Young Turks.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we will be talking to you next week.